Welcome back to MSP Confidential, everybody. It's Friday again, and that means we get to do this wonderful conversation. And today I've got a wonderful guest coming in from just down the border in California, Tom Hermstad of H&D Technologies. Welcome to the show, my man. So great to meet you over the last couple of days. How have you been?
I've been good. I'm stoked to be here, but I'm hoping that we haven't We had so much riffing going on all the topics. I hope I'm going to be as good. I felt like we were jamming before the video or before the webinar, and I want to make sure we deliver that good content today.
Totally. You got to bottle the energy and keep it going for when we ask the question for real kind of thing.
Yep.
Well, we were just kind of having a giggle because we were ships in the night this last week when we were both in Houston at the same time, but we didn't really know each other until a couple of days ago. And so we just kind of, you're not conditioned to see the person or notice the person. And so we were at Evolve the whole week and just kind of missed it. But Jason Makovich, who came on the podcast not too long ago, I have this habit of asking folks, who you think would be a great guest to come on the show? And you say you'd be a great guest. And so here you are. And you've been a very cordial and willing subject to invite on. And there's lots of great topics we've been chatting about, not the least of which is this topic around supply chain that we were just getting into backstage right before we got on. And so before we lose the thread of all the ideas and the excitement, I wanted to ask you about supply chain. You mentioned that you've been talking to clients a little bit more about supply chain in general, because I think this is maybe a largely ignored part of the risks that exists for small businesses in when they work with vendors and so on, to the point where you even have a letter for your customers on supply chain and trying to get them educated on this. Tell me a little bit more about your thoughts on supply chain and how you're talking to clients about it.
I feel like it's a real under thought about area. Everyone worries about the client's cyber posture and thinks hard about that. But if a strong partner or vendor gets attacked and you can't get the parts you need to make the widget that you make in the manufacturing sense, you're essentially out of business because of somebody else's cyber attack. And I think it's important for the business owners and the business leaders at our clients we need to educate them so that they know to be asking about, hey, do you have a cyber plan? Even do you have a cyber posture document? Do you have cyber insurance? There's a whole host of, and we try and help them learn all these different questions that can be asked. And we even offer to do a free assessment to our customers, supply chain and partners, so that if they don't have a baseline of where they are, we'll help them achieve that.
This is so interesting. And I was telling you as well how just last weekend, I got to hang out with this person who works at a large global clothing company. And when we're trading stories of, and what do you do type of thing, she's like, well, I have this interesting position where I think about risk at a global scale, to the effect of, well, my company has to be able to acquire or procure materials from these 10 countries, and political unrest might create certain conditions where that makes it more difficult and that interrupts our entire supply chain. And so I think we experienced a little bit of this with the COVID chip supply chain shortage. And
Heck
I
yeah.
think
Still going on, by the way.
and I think
From
there's many little things like this, like cars had the same challenge, and we perhaps don't stop to long enough ever to think about risk, just generally speaking, especially at a small business. And so, how are your clients reacting to this conversation? Does it seem too foreign or too distant for them to care, generally speaking, or are they kind of cluing in a bit more?
I think it's incumbent upon us as managed security service providers to educate. And we were talking earlier, it was an MSP before, kept the servers running and patched the servers and fixed the broken printers. And our world has totally changed over the last, 6 years, 7 years.
Totally.
And getting people to understand their true risks is what we should be doing as an industry. And I always tell people, we need to hold ourselves to a higher bar professionally as MSPs, MSSPs. Our impact to the business is the same as or higher than the lawyers or the accountants, the other strategic partners that have a seat at the table at the executives to the executives ear. And we need to be doing that. It's incumbent upon us to explain. So and they need to, if they're not understanding the risk, then we're not doing our job and we're not doing our explaining properly.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Do you think the right set of incentives is in place for the industry to self-regulate? I mean, it feels like, with how small the typical MSP startup is of one, two, three people, where maybe Simon Sinek talks about it, the ethical fading. Some choices are maybe less important at that scale, and more compromises are being made at that scale. So, the incentives, do you think we will be able to self-regulate, or will we just face the certain doom of government imposed regulation?
Well, I mean, CPAs didn't, they have the CPA exam, and it's this brutal exam, and the lawyers have the bar. And when you're an MSP, the bar to getting into being an MSP is going like this. I know computers.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that people just demanding like CISSP, and really looking at the security certs of the techs, that's a big thing and has been a big push for ours, over the years. I don't see how we don't get some form of regulation in the future. We're too important, and what we give the companies and what we do for the companies is too important. Eventually, someone's going to catch on that this needs to be looked at, and that there needs to be some bar to being able to be in this business and call yourself the managed services security provider.
Yeah, indeed. Slow roll. It's a slow burn, slow progression. Was it Exchange Security? I think I was at last year. And this interesting gentleman who works at a white hat organization. What they do is they do penetration testing and supply chain analysis and stuff at the software level for large software companies. He had a little Q&A at the end. I asked him, do you think that the government or the laws are following closely enough with the rate of change and the actual technology? And he was like, no, never. Like, technology is always going to be 10 years ahead of regulation, of law. And so he definitely positioned that as a real challenge. I think we're just never going to be, we'd have to slow down the pace of innovation and change for the governments and the regulations to catch up in a certain extent. And so it's interesting, like you see this a bit with AI to some extent, where like
Totally.
the European Union came in and basically put a lockdown on some of this stuff because they're not sure about the ethics, they're not sure about these things. So now there's like this very big damper on the innovation around AI in the EU. And so I suppose this could happen in other places too, as the government gets a little bit more concerned about cybersecurity awareness. Then again, the U.S. government is handing databases of all citizens to Elon Musk's employees for for efficiency analysis. So I don't know. Maybe we've created our own hamster wheel.
Efficiency analysis. Ooh,
So
I think we need to do a topic change. We're veering into an interesting area there.
well, let's get back on topic for a second. We
What?
call this.
Well, can I just on the whole government, catching up to technology thing? It's technology is moving too fast. It's one of the central things that's the problem is the government's used to dealing with railroads and those type of infrastructures that take a long time to change, and so they can catch up and they can help try and regulate it. That's a huge challenge for AI and even for our industry. We move too quickly, and I don't know the solution there, other than it's incumbent upon us to self-police and to be cognizant of getting better as an industry. I firmly believe that, and I'm glad to be here because I like to sing that from the rooftops as much as I can. Do the trust yet verify thing. Did we talk about that yet?
No, I was just about
Can
to
we
shift
switch?
into that. Yeah. Well,
Oh,
let me kind of set up the conversation, because one
yeah.
of the things we were talking about is you have a 30 plus year career in the industry. You were one of the first MSPs in California, second oldest, I think you told me, second oldest MSP in California, and that you are very collegial with the oldest MSP also in your region. And you
Albaca
have
Networks. Yep.
And that you guys have a regular communication stream around your nerds of the roundtable, NORT, as you call
Yes.
it, sharing
Yep.
best practices, sharing community, helping rise the tide for all boats, all that stuff. So tell me about first of all, like your view of community in playing an active role in helping inform the end user, the consumer, the small business.
Well, interesting thing of Nerds of the Roundtable. It's a group of we all compete in this geographic Southern California area. We all meet once a week. In fact, we had our Nort call was from 9 to 10 this morning. So I just got off that call, and I was telling the guys I'm on this, and they all ribbed me. But it's really there are so much. I was going to say we've never, of all the people, I think there's 6 people in Nort. Of all of us, we've never come into contact and competitively been bidding on the same account. Think about that. We're all in this geographic area, and I've never once gone up against them. I've had clients call me from a Nort member, but I've never like gone in and trying to get an account and realize I'm going against this client or this partner or that partner that we work with in Nort. So the I'm losing my track, but the there's so much business out there
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
that we can totally talk and work together to get better, like we talked about earlier, raising the bar for MSSPs in general. That people shouldn't be afraid of that. It find people that you like, and it's a lonely business and it's scary, right? We have so much pressure on us and so much risk as MSSPs. It's good to have another peer group that you can talk to and you can share a story with and you can get better with.
Absolutely. And you say the term MSSP specifically, and I think that this might help, the fact that you over the years narrowed your focus a little bit more, became MSP or security specific, and maybe that reduced the number of clients you were working with overall and just kind of a little bit more targeted. But tell me a bit about the transition from general services MSP to now this very focused MSSP drive, the security stuff.
So the left of boom, right of boom thing and the focus, is that what you're driving at?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we call ourselves a right of boom company. Everyone probably knows left of boom, boom, and right of boom. Should I explain that, or should we
I,
assume
I think our
that people
audience
know?
is savvy enough, but
Okay.
maybe high level for the
So
transcript.
so the left of boom is preparing and setting up your perimeter. The boom is when you actually get attacked successfully, and right of boom is what the heck you do after you have had been attacked to get back online. We really focus on preparing because we believe it's not if, it's when. If they really want to get to you and they find a 0 day, they're going to get through your defenses and they're going to get on your systems. Then what? You have to identify they're there quickly. You have to lock them out quickly. You have to have set up their systems so that you can get back up and online quickly and at the least cost possible and the fastest possible. So that's really where we talk about focusing on, as opposed to, like I said earlier, patching servers or patching network hardware. All those things we still do. We count, does that help the security for our customers, for our clients? And instead of talking about just the pure play MSP and keeping people up, we've just switched that whole conversation into, if you believe it's not if, it's when, you have to prepare for the when. You have to take the steps. And I always tell my customers, it's terrible. We do IR and have done IR, incident response, for Alvaca, the partner that we have that is an IR company. And I've been through some very terrible incidents. And I always tell people it's going to suck. It's going to be really hard. But if you have a plan and as it happens that I've done the planning and I'm ready for this, the amount of stress just goes down so much. And the same goes for like cyber insurance. When you know that you're going to have the money to implement the plans, the stress goes way down. So, chance favors the prepared mind, right? What is it? Uh, Preparing to plan is preparing to fail, or whatever that
Yeah,
saying is.
failing to plan is preparing to fail. Yeah.
There you go. That you did it better than I did.
Uh, uh,
So
and maybe I'll segue with another expression I like, which is the confused mind always says no. And I think this is a real problem for a lot of MSPs trying to communicate, the challenges of security to their clients, why they need to do X, Y, or Z in the context of their business, the belief maybe or disbelief that any of these things are going to affect them in the big scheme of things. So how do you get a client from this confusion state to clarity? And what do you think clarity looks like for an end customer?
I think it gets down to conversations as opposed to selling. When we do our strategic business reviews, we're engaging the liaison, the executive, hopefully, that's on the call, and we're having real world conversations. What does it look like to go through a cyber attack? And not from a fear standpoint, but just to be prepared to know, what that's going to feel like, who needs to be involved. People don't even know like that you have to call your breach counsel first, and then
Right.
you're getting the IR firm, and you have to notify the cyber. We have these conversations, and we teach them about what it means to go through something like this, and that's the first step to really understanding that you need to prepare. And I just say have conversations rather than, this presentation type of thing. And we just did a strategic business review yesterday with one of our clients, big construction company. They do boring for giant tunnels. And we just had this whole conversation. They are an on-premise company. They have on-premise servers. And I've been trying to talk to them a lot about, um, moving to Azure. We're a big Microsoft shop, and they're one of our last customers that has on-prem. And what we ended up doing is saying, "Hey, you're not getting it. I'm trying to explain to you why this is important, but I'm not. I'm doing a bad job. How do I do a better job to explain this to you?"
Mm-hmm.
And the guy like opened up a spreadsheet and said, "Show me right here." We spent an hour and a half building the spreadsheet out of what it means to do on-prem versus what it means to do cloud-based computing. And at the end, he's like, cloud-based computing is less expensive over 5 and 10 year period, and it has these 15 advantages. It's so easy for me now to understand what you're saying. And that all came out of just like riffing and doing like what we're doing right now. Same thing has to happen on the cyber front. You have to like walk through scenarios, and sometimes they're like, "Tom, I really don't care if my data got exfiltrated. We don't have social security numbers. We don't have this." That's not a primary concern for me. Now, I would argue that almost all the time, but you're having a conversation.
Yeah, I see way more incidents or incidences of the use of tabletops. The software vendors are doing more tabletops. The MSPs are starting to get around to doing tabletop exercises with their clients, or at the very least, the administrative part of a tabletop exercise. Like, what are the steps we need to take? Not necessarily doing an actual demo of an incident, but tell me about the tabletop idea and to what extent you do this with customers to help them see the light, so to speak.
That it's one of our when we bring a new client on, we always propose writing a DR plan and doing a DR test and doing an instant response, a tabletop exercise. It that's a huge part of preparing for the when. It's the first steps towards preparing for the when, and so I think it's imperative that all MSPs and MSSPs are are doing that. Again, it's a higher level, right? It's not fixing broken printers, it's not patching, it's helping the business decrease risk.
Yeah. Do you have a philosophical stance on what to do with the clients that just don't get it and in kind of you don't see a path forward? Do you persevere to try and get them to understand so you can help them, or do you let them move on, free up their future, so to speak? What's your philosophical stance on that?
That's such a tough thing. I mean, we have clients for 10 and 12 and 15 years, and I've had clients that I've taken from a small warehouse with a trailer out back to being sold to a $1 billion company. And you develop the relationship over that time that's really tight. And there's a lot of trust there. But if they stop listening, first of all, I'd ask myself the question, why are they not listening? If they listened before, why are they not listening now? And what do I have to do with
Right.
that? But there are times when in this world, supporting them, if they're not going to do what you need them to do to protect themselves from risk, all that does is push the risk off onto us. Because when happens, it's going to be terrible. And who is it going to mostly be terrible for besides them? It's going to be terrible for us. And that's hard to put your people through, our engineers. And so sometimes we have had to make that decision over the last couple of years. People just aren't getting the cyber. They're not understanding the risk. They won't get cyber insurance. They won't do a lot of the minimum things that we need to do to keep them as safe as possible and decrease the chances of them getting hit. And then you have to make that hard decision to, free them up, like you just said. And it makes me kind of sick right now thinking about that, because I don't like to give up. I want to. There's that commitment to, when you're an MSSP, there's that commitment to the client, and I don't want to give that up easily.
Yeah. I think this is an interesting part of what resilience kind of needs to feel like and look like. I saw this interesting video, Instagram reel yesterday, and it was this lady, Dr. Becky, talking to a room about resilience. And I was kind of thinking about this in the context of MSP, MSSP, and the process that we go through to from not knowing something to knowing it, and the squiggly line that exists in between in the process of learning, and the frustration that is felt in the process of learning. And they talk about how resilience is a bit like this. Resilience has a positive connotation, but most of the time feels really terrible, because when you need to have resilience, you're probably in a messy situation, an incident, a security incident, and so on. And I think for MSPs, one of the things she calls out in the video is how the people that, especially people that are smart, struggle with the idea of spending too much time in the learning phase, where things are kind of gray area and they feel uncomfortable, and I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here. Why can't I just be over here? And so then shortcuts are taken, or they just kind of default back to the process. This great expression I love, that which is, people don't rise to the level of their goals, they fall to the level of their processes. And so I think that's an interesting thing. And I just wanted to ask you, maybe, I realize it's kind of an abstract theme, but this topic around resilience, do customers get it? Like, how do you think about resilience, and how do you talk to your team about resilience?
Interesting question. The I guess my feeling on resiliency is that it's that ability to respond, right? I mean, when you think of resilience, is that what you think? The ability to respond to a given situation effectively?
Yeah, the preparedness, if you
Uh,
will.
yeah, preparedness. And so I'm harping on some themes here, but it's that ride a boom. It's preparing for that. It's that to me is resilience. And it's that conversation. It's the education. It and people have accused me when I do my talks. Hey Tom, you're selling with fear, and rather than, well, no, I'm not. I kind of lean into it and I say, I really thank you. I am, and you should be afraid. And fear is a great motivator, right?
Yeah,
But it's that whole communication thing we were talking about earlier. Is if you don't have that high level communication with the executives at the company, you're not going to be able to get the movement to even understand resilience, and then to be resilient. It
yeah,
it's an education process. I think Jason would say the same thing. I mean, he's just crazed on, he's even more crazed on cyber than I am. And he's constantly talking about, hey, you have to be having conversations. You can't be telling. You have to have conversations, and you have to engage people so that they want to learn. They're
totally.
engaged. It's that's where it's at right now.
Yeah, maybe another vector of this resiliency conversation is this idea that it's going to feel ugly, it's going to feel messy, and it's not just preparedness, but in the thick of that situation, being able to overcome a bit of that feeling, that messiness, get to the other side. I remember feeling a bit of this going through COVID, because you don't know what's on the other side of it necessarily, and you kind of have this idea that this is maybe the end, or does this plague take us all down, kind of thing. I remember thinking those thoughts at one point or another. And I think in the thick of that, some people might give up, be like, I'm not cut out for this. I don't see how we're going to recover from this. And it's no surprise why some of the stats show that businesses that get breached, there's a high percentage of them that don't come back.
60% in the first year go out of business.
Yeah. And so I would probably attribute some of that to resiliency, and maybe not having gone through the exercise to understand what it should feel like, so that you can recognize it in the process and be able to overcome it, or power through when you need it. And I think a lot of people maybe get surprised by the feeling of this is over, I suppose, to some extent. And I don't know. I'm not going anywhere with that. It was not really a question, but more of an observation on that vector of resiliency. But I'm sure you had incidents that you've dealt with where people maybe struggled with, like, what's on the other side of this, right?
Well, I always impress upon people who ask about, I get questions when I talk about what should we be looking for in MSSP, an MSSP. I'm really struggling with that acronym today. The real world experience, I always tell people, the real world experience of knowing what it is to deal with an actual event is really important. I've been on the end of a 2:00 in the morning call from the SOC saying, this client of yours, they're on there, they're going to drop the payload. I want your okay to lock their network down. I mean, talk about rocking your world. And I get emotional just thinking about that. I mean, seriously, like when I just described that situation, it all like came back to me. I'm like losing my train of thought because it's so stressful. And I think if you can not scare people, but just share with them what it means to go through something like that, then the conversation about resilience is a totally different one than just, I'm going to explain resiliency to you and you should do it. That's a totally different thing than viscerally feeling what I just felt right there, and then going, if I prepare, that feeling's going to be a lot less. And sometimes when I do my talks at the beginning, I say, everyone close your eyes. You just got hit by a ransomware attack. You just walked in the door and all your screens have a ransomware thing up. And I walk them through just 5 or 6 things that are going to happen, right? If you're doing your job and if you've prepared, you're going to go through and do it. And then I say, open your eyes. And I ask them, like, so whose heart rate is not going right now? And nobody ever raises their hand. Their eyes are like big, like, holy moly. And, I think it's important for people to understand, as from a business owner standpoint, that that visceral thing of 60% of the businesses go out of business in a year after a successful attack, and I don't want to be part of that statistic. So I need to prepare.
Yeah. Do you hopefully proceed immediately to have them open their mindfulness app and do some breathing exercises and return to normalcy?
Yeah. I should say, okay, now we're gonna take a few cleansing breaths, and we're gonna do the rest of the talk, and we're gonna. One of the guys from Alvaca, the company that does the IR for us, which Dave Cunningham from Alvaca Networks would be a great, here's a guy who runs 350 incident responses a year. So he's in Nort, and he would be a fantastic one for you to interview. He's a hoot. He's super funny too, way more funny than I am.
I will ask for the intro in due time. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was help me. I lost my train there.
No, that horrible feeling and being able to recognize it. And I guess converting the individual to wanting to do something about avoiding feeling that way again. And I think that's just it. If people have never gone through that before, never experienced it, there's a certain amount of disbelief that it's ever going to happen, because you don't recognize it until it really happens. And this is kind of the whole joke about this, is that people don't take it seriously until they get hit for the first time. And so it's such an interesting, I guess, challenge to try is to solve at the industry level of like how we have more of these conversations without having to put people through that turmoil mentally, psychologically with their business and so on. And so it's an interesting challenge for sure.
Agreed.
What does your
Yeah.
group at Nort talk about in this respect? Because just like we're kind of throwing the topic and the feeling around, I imagine you have a lot of these conversations to some extent with your colleagues as well in Nort.
Well, we talk about, especially from a, what's happening out there. Dave from Alvaca comes and he like tells us, we call it the in the wild report. Not what's happening 3 weeks ago because you read it on a Reddit post. What happened yesterday in the wild when they got a brand new case?
Wow.
And so we spend a lot of time. He updates us on that, and then we riff on, hey, how are we going to change our posture for our clients to deal with this new threat, and this new way of going about these attacks. So we do a lot of that. We do baloney around a little bit, joke around, and give each other grief.
Of
So
course.
that's always fun, right? Um, uh, and then
That's
each of us have different. One of us specializes in really smaller companies, and his perspective is a little different than our perspectives are. And then Jason, who you had on from Greenlight, he is just straight up cyber only. He is not running systems really anymore. He is just helping. He helps MSPs do better cyber. And so he gives us all these ideas and thoughts. He is a CISSP, and he provides that. And then Chad from Bright City, he's a motivational guy. So he really works on motivating his engineers and motivating his staff to give the best they can. And he's constantly talking to us about how to be a better leader. So all of us, I'm trying to wonder what I bring. Maybe I put together the team's call. That's what I brought into the situation, into the group. But
I'm sure you
everybody
can give
has,
yourself more credit than that, my friend.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah.
But so everyone's bringing these ideas. Jason talked for a long time today about, about one of the new business things that he's thinking about doing, and it was engaging, and it was super interesting, and it keeps us at the top of our game, right? When we're talking in Nort, you're talking to the best in this area, the best MSSPs that there
Yeah.
are, and so you better be able to bring knowledge, or you're not a participant in the group, and
Yeah.
it's and Chad's involved with me, but he says that he thinks the Nort is the big game changer for him as opposed to even Evolve. And I'm telling you, Evolve is crazy as a game changer. You've been there, but just what we get out of that. So if I can share with other other MSPs and MSSPs, talk to people, find a group that you can be with, that you can talk to.
Yeah.
It really is really helpful for getting better, and for also, hey man, sometimes I just need to vent a little bit about a situation or whatever, and guys will listen and say, hey, I understand what you're going through. Here's how I dealt with that last time, because I've been through that before 2 years ago. So
So
it's really cool.
this community piece is so fascinating. Not too long ago, I was chatting with a friend I have in Europe, and they were planning some kind of MSP event and to bring people to the thing. And at the time, they were kind of complaining about how difficult it was to try and get anybody's attention, because sometimes they would put a call in to, hey, would you like to come to this event? And it was put on by their colleagues, by other MSPs. And some people would hang up the phone on them. And I thought this was interesting. And it occurred to me in that moment to ask the question, do you think in your community where you are in Europe, are people attend these things because they want to give, because they want to give some value and provide their knowledge and share that knowledge? Or do you think they're there to take? What do you think the overarching kind of feeling is of the community where you are? And immediately the answer, without hesitation, was, oh, they're there to take. And so I think this is an interesting thing that happens when you are in a position where people are giving so freely and giving so much knowledge that you feel that need to do the same. So that generosity begets generosity in many ways. And I want to maybe ask you about the nuance of that a little bit, because I think a lot of people, it takes them a long time to realize that there's a lot of things that they could be giving from a knowledge perspective, from a energy perspective, from a help
Experience.
experience. Yeah, so many things that are not necessarily the bleeding edge of cyber security initiatives or whatever, but there's many parts to that equation, right? But your thoughts on that community and that sense of giving. I know it's a big part of the Evolve community, the Go Giver mentality too. So
Yeah, the Go Giver book. We all read the Go Giver in Nort. I totally believe in that. If you're holding back information, if you're worried that we don't have any secret sauce, we all do the same thing. There's nothing that I can tell the guys in Nort that they don't already know or they don't already have that tool. It's very rare in our industry that we have that that secret sauce that no one can know about because it's so unique. So when you take that out of the equation, you know, it's just I don't know. I can't tell you. It's one of the best times of my week is when we do our Nort talk. And when I miss, I'm like, darn it. Sometimes if I have to miss, I get on for like 30 seconds. Hey guys, how's it going? Have a great call. I did that because we were at Evolve last Friday. We were doing the Evolve thing, but I stepped out and I talked to my Nort guys for a few minutes, and then I got back in there, and I got grief for leaving and coming back because you're not supposed to do that. But I need, and then I told them I was doing Nort. I was talking to my Nort guys, and they're like, "Oh, okay, we get it."
now I'm not infringing on your Friday Nort call right now, are we? Am I
No,
in
no,
trouble? Am I in trouble?
we did that this morning.
Okay, okay.
9 o'clock PST. It was wonderful.
I was starting to worry that I'd be, in your bad list for having, taken time away from the Nord guys. So
No, I love this. I appreciate just having the opportunity. I think we do stuff different. I think with 30 years of experience, while that's not the only thing that's important, I do have that long-term view of the industry and stuff. And I love being able to, I hope that maybe some of the stuff I say resonates with a newer MSP, and, maybe he or she goes out to find somebody that they can talk to, and maybe they decide that they really want to raise their game up from a business perspective. And that, like I said, that just helps the industry. So that's kind of one of my real missions, is to spread the word about being open and not being afraid, because if you close yourself off because you think that I can't talk to my competitors, that's not the Go Giver attitude, and that's not a happy way to go about life. Is insulated and I don't know, protective, and as opposed to just like we are today, just being open and riffing on all these different subjects. So
yeah, indeed. I think mentorship there plays a big role, and I think we're still learning so much. Each of our individual businesses kind of doesn't necessarily have the time for what we would call the one-on-one mentoring, but it happens, and we do it willingly and freely. We don't even realize we got into that situation because we do like sharing the information. And so I think it's just a great spirit in our industry to have, and it's super critical to combat some of the more difficult attitudes, like the defiance of all things. Smart people tend to be like this. The cynicism, the jadedness. There's all these other challenges that we have to deal with, and this little gleaming light of positivity and giving is such a cool thing to experience. So I definitely encourage it every time I do that as well. This is one of the reasons I love the Evolve community so much, because everybody there is just in the spirit of giving, and it's so obvious too. It really kind of brings everybody along for the ride when you see it at scale like that. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's I'm pretty new to Evolve. That was my third meeting, and I guess my big takeaway from my third meeting is I wish I would have been in Evolve 3 years ago or 5 years ago, because I did Vistage for a long time it's a peer advisory system and group, but it's not specific to managed services providers. And I think I stuck in that for too long. I did that for 15 years, and I loved it. The speakers are just first rate. But man, getting into Evolve and being around people who run $50 million MSPs and having them share stuff with you, the I hate saying the should statements, but I should have done this, a few years ago. But at least
Sure.
I'm in there now, and it's spectacular. I mean, Arlen's done a great job. What was it before? It was
HTG.
HTG. I mean, and he's still involved, and he's still, there and leading, and it's just he's inspiring to me,
Yeah.
just as a person and as a leader.
I love it. Um, along these lines of life, one of the things we talked about a couple of days ago, because I often ask this question, and it's, what are some of the interesting parallels you maybe have transplanted from some of your personal passions? And you brought up, you're an ocean guy, you like to surf, you like to fish, you like to dive, and I see the surfing board right behind you. And so I think it's always
That
interesting
I
when,
changed that out. That just started a couple of days ago. I have all these are what are called wall hanger boards. So I don't actually surf those boards. They're made by a really famous shaper, and so I always put a new one every couple weeks or so. I put it in there. So it's cool. But I know what you're talking about on the. It's the I equated, I think, if I'm remembering right, surfing, or just being in the ocean in general is so much fun, and it's such a great thing. And I love taking people who haven't had an ocean experience and take them out. But the one thing about the ocean is it doesn't care about you. And there's risk every time you step onto the board or into the water or on the boat. And when things go bad, they go bad quick on the ocean.
yeah,
And when you're 20 miles away from help, you better have your stuff together. And I think that understanding risk and being prepared, maybe I do take that from surfing and being on the water into H&D, because I sit people down when they get on the boat and they haven't been on the boat before, and I say, hey, this is going to be a great time, this is what we're going to be doing, and I just want you to be ready. When stuff goes wrong on a boat, it goes wrong quick. And I'm gonna, if something's going wrong, I'm gonna tell you to do something, and it's not gonna be polite. And I don't want any talk back. You need to do exactly what I say when I say that to do it, because it could be the difference between living or dying. And and I'm like, I'm not joking. This is
yeah.
super fun, but it's super serious. And it's the same thing for cyber. I mean, I don't use that analogy, and I think I'm gonna now,
New
because
level unlocked. I love it. It's a great
it
analogy.
is a good. I leveled up there, but it's so true. But I love the ocean. I love. I work to be able to do stuff like that. I mean, it's not just about making the money. It's about what does that money enable you to do with your life, to be with your children, to do great things and adventures and everything like that. So I think that's what we talked about before the call,
Yeah,
right?
and I
Yeah.
think you've unlocked a whole new level as you talked about it again just now. And I think what I'm taking from the way you explained that just now, and I saw the shift in your energy level, is that I think those life parallels maybe give us a little bit of permission to be bold in the thing that we know so well, that we can produce an example situation where we can make the parallel and have somebody understand it so much better as a result. And so, dude, I'd love to hear a follow up on how you implemented this into your conversations, because I'd love to seriously know how some of your clients maybe reacted to the ocean parallel.
Well, I
So
put this out to all of our clients, so maybe some of them are watching, and I know a few of my engineers that haven't heard my shtick 400 million times before are probably watching as well. So it'll be interesting to hear them say, "Hey, that resonated with me." Explaining about being on the ocean and the risk of being on the ocean and being prepared, and then taking that to being prepared for the cyber when.
yeah,
It'll be interesting. And I got to give a shout out. I have all A players. I would say probably we have A plus players and to have a team at H&D that is that good and that good all the time, and we have each other's back. We're great communicators. We're leaders in our areas. I got to give a shout out to them because none of this would be. I wouldn't have the time to talk about stuff like this and try and help out in the industry like this if I didn't have them, running the systems that keep people safe. So
I love it.
yeah.
Well, kudos on building a great team. I think it takes a village really to do it. And what a great thing to segue to, because one of the things I asked Jason specifically at the last one is if there was a question he'd like to ask a future guest. And he didn't know that you'd come on at the time. So I'm going to drop the question that Jason left for a future guest, which was, what do you see as the biggest thing that will change for MSPs over the next 2 to 5 years? What do you see as the biggest thing that will change for
it's
MSPs?
not fair because Jason talks about that all the time. So I know the answer to the question from Jason's standpoint. But I think that, and I was talking to Dave, the guy that does the incident response this morning, and he was saying, there's talk at his company about IR and incident response and how they're basically making money off of bad guys, right? If the bad guys weren't ransoming the systems, they would not be able to do this thing that makes them a lot of money. And it makes them feel uncomfortable, even though they're doing something good. They're only able to do that business because of someone doing something really bad. So I think that I don't think that the ransomware thing is going to change. He feels the same way, that it's gonna continue going. I know, and this is something Jason talks about a lot, is BYOD and how do we secure the enterprise with people using more and more of their own devices. He really feels, and I feel the same way, that if you're not changing and you're not evolving as an MSSP, you're dying, because the pace of change is so fast. So that's one of the great things he does in Nort, is he's one of those guys that's looking out 2 years, 3 years, 5 years in the industry, and where are we going and what are the challenges going to be, and he brings that to the group. So my questions a lot of time get developed by Jason, because he's constantly asking those questions of us.
I love it.
So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that he had a great open-ended question like that.
There's this great expression I heard not too long ago, and it's perfect bookend to our conversation today, which is, what you're not changing, you're choosing. And I think in the context of security especially, but of technology also, not moving forward is not staying the same, is actually going backwards.
Yes.
And so it's such an imperative in our business, definitely, to continue advancing. Even, we make light of the lifestyle MSP, the business that's kind of trekking along, doesn't want to make a lot of big waves or changes, but that's actually pulling them backwards in many cases. And
pulling their clients backward too.
Yeah. So it's a great thought and sentiment to wrap up our conversation with. Tom, man, I look forward to getting together in Chicago maybe during the Q2 Evolve meetings, now that we will definitely notice each other. And I appreciate you coming on and having a bit of a chat, and appreciate your open mindedness and your knowledge sharing and all that. So kudos and congrats on the great team you have over there. And hope to see
I
you
really
soon.
appreciate it. Great time. I like I said, I don't know if you could figure it out, but I love to talk. So this is a perfect thing for me. And I appreciate your doing this, because we need more of this type of communication going on in the industry. Right. I mean, so this is important, and I think it's great that it's a passion of yours and that you're doing it, regularly. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Well, folks, this has been Tom Hermstad of H&D Technologies. We're here every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch everybody next week. Tom, stay on backstage for 2 seconds.